Now, more than 60% of Indonesia's emissions comes from land use and forestry sector. These sectors are projected to continue to be the largest emissions contributor by 2020. This is why a responsible natural resource management and land use plays a vital part in achieving the President's emissions reduction target. In conjunction with this commitment, Indonesia also set its target to achieve 7% economic growth. To achieve this economic growth, the government of Indonesia has just launched an ambitious economic master plan to create 6 economic corridors across the archipelago. The commitments to 26% emission reduction and 7% growth should not be juxtaposed in contradiction with one another. Indonesia is committed to striking a balance between emissions reductions and economic growth. We are dedicated to a more sustainable economic development and management of our natural assets. Plantation and forestry related sectors contribute to 0.1% of GDP growth in 2010. 0.1%. Although these sectors are not the major growth contributors, millions of people depend on the forest and forest commodities for their livelihood. This most importantly includes the stewards of our land, the indigenous communities with their customary way of life. Our land encompasses our natural resources. The issue of land tenure undoubtedly influences how we manage our natural resources nationwide as a response to the climate change challenge and for the benefit of the communities living in and around the forest. Improving forest governance and land tenure is in line with our effort to reduce poverty, as there are at least 10 million forest-dependent people who live under poverty line. Hence, we cannot address the sustainable use of our natural resources if we do not appropriately address the complexities of land tenure. And that is how access is granted to the rights to use, control, and transfer land, as well as define associated responsibilities and constraints. As such, finding the appropriate land tenure arrangements is a prerequisite for sustainable development and livelihood. The issue of land tenure and its linkage to development and people's welfare is what I would like to talk to you about today. Dear friends, undertaking steps towards sustainability is a relatively recent development in Indonesia's history. However, the issue of land rights and ownership have been discussed for over a century in Indonesia. Here's a bit of narrative for all of you. The first forestry law was enacted in 1865, 160 years ago, followed by the first agrarian regulation 5 years later in 1870. This provided a legal basis for the state to own land through domain declaration. the word adat or customary. Tenure system was respected only for areas not under the state's domain. Let me iterate this. Adat. The tenure system was respected only for areas not under the state's domain. After Indonesia's independence, Basic Agrarian Law was signed in 1960, whereby adat territories were recognized. Forestry law followed suit in 1967. Heavily influenced by the Dutch forestry law, under which adat forests were claimed as state land. In 1980, the newly established Ministry of Forestry defined 141 million hectares as forest estate. The area classified as forest estate was based on a survey and remote sensing technique available in that era, and through the applications of biophysical criteria, no customary consideration were accounted for. In 1999, the Basic Forestry Law was issued, providing the Ministry of Forestry with legal basis to define and manage forest estate. Authority to issue ownership rights, which is regulated in the 1960 Agrarian Law, was not addressed. The 1999 Basic Forestry Law is the most recent legal basis that governs our forests today. Indonesia consists of 190 million hectares of land, with a population of more than 220 million. And as we heard yesterday, 133 million hectares or 70% of our land is classified as forest estate and managed by Ministry of Forestry, and the remaining is called other land use or APL and managed by the National Land Agency. This division is the result of long history that I have outlined for you. A history that has deep implication on our current status. Ladies and gentlemen, what we confront now in Indonesia is the result of a journey spanning over a century. The long chronicle of forest and land tenure has brought this country to a point with two pressing challenges. Firstly, the dualism